Hello, everybody, and thank you for tuning in to our live streamed panel about documentary editing in celebration of all of our films being at the Slamdance Film Festival for 2021. I'm so thrilled that you are tuning in. We have some pretty intimidating and super talented editors here with us today to talk about the process of editorial for documentary and how to construct a narrative, and talking about collaborating with directors. And yeah, we're going to talk about some forward-thinking stuff too for those who are maybe aspiring to be an editor. So I'm going to ask our super talented lineup of panelists to turn on their cameras, and I'll do a little brief intro of everybody and talk about the films that are at the festival, and then I'll have them intro themselves as well. Great. So here we go. I'm going to introduce everybody. So we have Shane McLafferty. I hope I said that correctly. He has edited the 18th and Grand, the Olympic Auditorium documentary that is currently at Slamdance. He has several other very amazing credits to his name with a number of music videos and a second feature doc about Stevie Nicks that he worked on with Stevie Nicks, which is pretty dope. So we'll be asking about that. I also have oh my gosh, Ryan, I'm so sorry. You pronounced your last name, and now I'm afraid I'm going to say it wrong.
There is no wrong. It's just
head me off at the pass here? Ryan
Fritchie.
Ryan Fritchie, thank you. Ryan Fritchie has edited another amazing film at Slamdance called Holy Frit. And this is his fourth feature film that he's edited among several other commercial credits and short film credits. This is also his second feature collaborating with his director, Justin Monroe. And yeah, I'm very interested to talk with Ryan. And then of course, we have Jen Bradwell and Luke Schock, who are here with Bleeding Audio. Jen Bradwell is a longtime documentary film editor. She has just this laundry list of credits to her name as well, including Mine, which is taken by Katrina, which was a documentary at South by Southwest, and recently a doc called Resilience, which was at Sundance. And there's just so many credits here, I can't read them all, but she's a very talented editor as well. And then we have Luke Schock, who, inside story, Luke Schock and I are very old friends. I've known him for 18 years. He's a very good, talented dude. He's done several short films, some of them mine. He also edited Bleeding Audio, of course. And currently he is an AV producer at Nintendo. So he has literally everyone's dream job from when they were kids. So this is our super talented lineup. I am so excited for you guys to be here, and so excited for everyone who's tuning in. And yeah, we're gonna round table and just have everyone kind of talk a little bit about their experience. I know I just gave an overview, but yeah, Shane, did you wanna start? And let's hear a little bit about your history as a documentary editor and where you got started.
Hi, first of all, thanks for having me on this. This is awesome. It's an honor to do this, especially in this festival with the talent pool here. It's great. I guess my story is I come from kind of more the music world. I was a musician for a long time, and then I transitioned my career more into music videos for a decade plus when I moved out to Los Angeles in 2003. But I've over the course of my career, I've dipped in and out of documentary filmmaking. I used to be in news. I started in news before I moved out to Los Angeles. So I was like a camera guy for the new, the CBS station in Miami. So I've always been kind of in that world, and I found myself gravitating back towards documentary filmmaking from all the narrative stuff I did and all the fancy, pretty music videos and all that. And I've been lucky enough to combine the two. Like you said, the Stevie Nicks documentary I did a few years back was a whole lot of fun, and that sort of got me back into the feature-length doc world. And so yeah, I guess I don't know where I'm going with this, but I have now transitioned more from the short form world to the long form world, and now I'm doing documentary unscripted sort of docu-series stuff for television. That's the new thing. So
very cool.
Yeah, I guess that's where I am now, and it's kind of a hodgepodge of different things and scenarios, and a melting pot of experience, which is cool.
Cool. Anyway, yeah, we'll get into that.
That makes any sense. Yeah.
No, that's great. Thank you. And Ryan, can you talk a little bit about your history as an editor, where you got started and where you are today?
Yeah, well, I was a TV major in college, and I think I was a sophomore, and I figured out that I thought editing would be a good thing for me because I thought that kind of seems like what I'd like or would fit my nerdy personality. So, no offense to present company, but I felt like I like details, and I also like creative, and I'm impatient. I don't want to like stand on the set and imagine I want to see the actual finished product, So I kind of, and then I met Justin when I was a senior. My current wife, now wife, introduced us. We were dating. It was like, this guy Justin I heard about, and he's a musician, and I'm going to do a movie about a musician, and it was awful, but the relationship that came out of that was pretty profound. So years later, we get married. Justin's actually the best man at the wedding, so we have a long history. We started a company together for a while, and moved to LA in 2001 together, and so we relationship for a long time. We did this film, The Rock and Roll Dreams of Duncan Christopher, which was sort of the culmination of doing a lot of sort of things that were not quite features, all the things you do to make ends meet, and all this while I've freelanced as an editor for almost 20 years. And I moved to New York in 2010, and probably the most interesting thing in terms of unscripted stuff that I've done in New York was I produced and edited a show at Yahoo for a while, for like 3 years, about photography, which was fun, and very also like under the news umbrella. So trying to find ways to be creative within sort of the news, strictures is a good discipline. I cut infomercials at one point for a while, and which it's they're actually a lot harder because who wants to watch an infomercial, but to get someone to actually buy something. So, and then Justin and I, he's living on the West Coast, I'm living on the East Coast. We sort of knew he was doing this doc. We would chat every now and then, just like, hey man, what's going on? Oh, you're working on that film about the thing with the window, and oh yeah, okay. Didn't really think like that it was ever going to make sense for us to work on it because like 3,000 miles. And then in 2017, he kind of wrapped production, and he said, okay, now I've got to edit. And we got to chatting, and I said, I'd kind of like to be involved in this. And that would make sense. We have sort of all this history, we kind of came up together, taught each other how to make a movie, so to speak. So that was the genesis of that, and we figured out how to do it long distance, and then who knew that was going to become so fashionable, But
you guys got early experience in the remote editing category.
We were planning to do a lot of flying at the end, to be together at the end, and then we ended up this year finishing it, which was like, oh, so okay, we won't do so much of that.
Aw.
But thank God for Zoom. So
yeah, right. I mean, this is a whole other world. But awesome. Thank you for that. Now, I'd love to move on to Jen. Jen, can you talk a little bit about how you got started and where, how you got to where you are today? Give us a history of your work.
I somehow decided when I was 16 that I wanted to be a documentary editor, which is just, I still am like wrapping my mind around that, but living the dream, right? Mm-hmm. I had in high school, I had this very awesome like video production teacher, and we had these the 2 VHS decks, so it was camcorders and super linear editing where you would have to like press record like this fraction of a second before you press play on the other one to like make sure that the all the cuts were laying down correctly. And I don't know, there was something about that process where everyone else thought it was so tedious, and I loved it. And I didn't really like the rest of the production process, but I loved editing. So it was this kind of light bulb thing, like, oh, I should do that thing that I really like that other people don't like to do. And in film school, it seemed to be a similar experience. But it's interesting because at least in documentary, there's like, as a freelancer, there's kind of relative job security for a documentary film editor. You'll get hired like, somewhere between like 3 months and a year on a single project, which is pretty amazing. And it's usually like after they like have money raised, and you get to have this huge hand in creating the story. Take 200, 300, 400 hours of footage and make it into something watchable. It's like, it's not glamorous, and it looked like social distancing before we had a term for that, but it's really satisfying. I feel very, very lucky to be doing it.
Awesome. Thank you. That was great. I love that a 16-year-old Jen is like, this is it. This is everything. That's, I mean, what a feeling to know that at that age. So right. Good. Okay, Luke, tell us a little bit about your history and the work that you've done over the years as an editor and where you are today.
Sure. So like a lot of people on the panel, like in high school, I found an affinity for editing. I think I would ditch other classes to go like hide in the video production room, and like we would like digitize entire films and then cut them up and like make cruddy music videos to them and stuff. And then, after my wife graduated college, I hadn't gone to college, and I figured, oh, I guess I should go. And so you were in San Francisco and you'd had a good experience with the Academy. And so I followed suit and went there, and, had a lot of good teachers, and then just started working in the Bay Area. The Bay Area is like lots of testimonials and a lot of good place to like cut your teeth, just cutting down talking heads for a long time. And then there's a very like impressive scene with the documentary films that are made up there. And, I got a chance that's where I met Jen, and assisted on a couple of her projects that she was working on at the house I was working at. And cultivated those relationships, and now I'm still working with you guys.
Yay. Yeah, I'm pretty sure we both have ditched class together to edit shit in high school. So yeah, we go way back. Awesome. Thank you guys so much. So here's what I would love to open up the discussion and talk about, because I feel like this is the question that I'm asked the most as a director of a documentary, and it's one that I'm sure you guys are asked a lot as editors. But can you talk about constructing a narrative out of those 400 hours of footage, and just what, I mean, you don't need to go step by step, but like, what is the first step in that process? And then how do you kind of start piecing together that story? And then we'll talk about collaborating with directors afterwards. Let's see. So I was going to round table this, but if anyone wants to just raise their hand and go first, we can do that too. Okay. Awesome. Jen, yeah, take it away.
Yeah, and not the quick process to synopsize, but I will try. When I first meet with a director, they're clearly at that point where they're so ready to start, seeing watchable scenes, and it's very hard to have those creative conversations until you have watched all the footage and become the expert in the material that they are. So I feel like there's always this kind of uncomfortable period of like needing to hold them off until I can really absorb all the material and then come to them with some ideas. But I feel like the process, throughout the edit is how to prevent yourself by feeling so overwhelmed by the enormity of the material and finding ways to boil it down. And so instead of relying on transcripts so much, I'll make just a ton of log notes that's on anything that feels remotely usable or interesting in the footage, and then export those log notes into Excel spreadsheets so that I have this like Bible of the film. Like instead of, thousands of pages of transcripts, I have my binder of like, these are all the needles in the haystack. And that's the first kind of process of boiling it down. And then I'll go over those things and, see what's most interesting on like a second or third read through from those log notes. And then, get the 3x5 cards, eventually you want to try to get it to the point where you're like Tom Cruise in Minority Report, like you have like the relevant stuff in one field of vision where it's like a Word doc that's, 6 pages taking up your screen, or like a bunch of cards on a wall where you can, see what the golden nuggets are and make these connections that would otherwise be hard to make when you're just like staring at all the footage in Premiere, however organized it is. Like for me, that my process, I have to boil it down until I'm at that point and try to, come up with, a hook of a scene idea and like ask, what is really being accomplished in that scene, and how does that make you want to get to the next scene and the next scene, and think about like the specific mission for each scene as I'm figuring out what that first story arc idea is like.
That's awesome. Thank you. I mean, it's so interesting too, because as a director, you know, you kind of have this, just this mental encyclopedia of everything that's in your head, and it kind of feels jumbled. And I feel like having an editor come in with a more objective pass to be able to like cull some of those scenes together, or you know, maybe some of the moments that you forgot as a director that exist in the, you know, in the recesses of the B-roll somewhere. It's really interesting hearing that you're able to just collect everything in a very formulaic way that is also inherently very creative too. So yes. So does anyone else want to chime in on their first step once they get that footage?
Yeah, that's really interesting. I like the it's funny, I hate reading so much that process to me almost gives my palms like a little schwitz, you know? It's an awesome process, and I didn't think of it that way in terms of actually really organizing things in that particular manner. And I'm listening to this and I'm like, that's really, really good to actually have that structured that way. And I'm just so afraid of the written word, I guess, in a way that I tend to be more tactile with, you know, getting in the project, looking at the footage, and start collecting thoughts and ideas in groups of, you know, potential moments in the actual project. So I like to grab things and move them and put them, and I use that as kind of my logging space. And in my experience, I also am sort of accustomed to working on, you know, things that don't really have the money to give me the time to be able to do these things. Because that's the other thing too, is a lot of times it's like, I would love to have this particular amount of time to really get familiar with every frame. Because that's what I definitely, I like, I agree with Jen 100% that's the hardest thing to do, is to like, just, I want to know everything that exists, because I can't work with it until I know, because I know that if I rely on somebody else to pick my moments, it's just not, they're not going to find the thing that I'm looking for. And it's just, no matter how great the people helping me in that process are, I always am sort of, maybe it's a kind of, maybe I'm just scared and holding on too tight a little bit, but I get very paranoid about that they're just going to miss something. So I tend to be I want to see everything. When I get into it, generally, the biggest thought that the biggest concept that I've picked up along the way has been the film, just as a kind of a general concept, the film will tell you what it is. Like that's something that I've learned, that's why I love the process of documentary filmmaking specifically, is because in a way it's a lazy thing, because I'm like, I don't want to have to construct something from scratch. Like I want it to tell me what it is. And if you spend enough time with it, it's going to happen. It's just the thing that happens every time. And, you know, you could probably say that about many creative endeavors, but like this particular medium is really cool like that. Because if you really just kind of let it speak and get out of the way, it's going to tell you what it is. And then the hardest job that you're going to have, other than the man hours putting it together, is going to be, you know, I'm going to say killing babies, but the drowning kittens metaphor earlier, you know.
Oh yeah, you guys were we hadn't live streamed yet, but instead of killing babies, Jen says drowning kittens.
which is awesome. I'm going to use that from now on for sure. So that's I don't want to take, because I know that my process is probably indicative of most, you know, editorial processes. I don't want to take any more time, but that's the basic thing.
No, that was great.
I like to just let it kind of speak and you know, go from there. And, you know, that's
I'm going to have a follow-up to that one, because I feel like, it'll be more related to the film that you worked on, but I want to move in and talk to Ryan. Ryan, did you have any, you know, any insight to what this like first step is that you do when you pull open, you know, years of footage?
There's what I mean. I have a staff job just the last few months, for the first time in a long time, but since the beginning. So I've always, as a freelancer, I've always had like different masters, you know, every few weeks or every few months. So I think one of the things I said when I first was learning to edit, and I was like in college, it was like continuity is like, that's the first thing you got to figure out, is how to like put two shots together and they feel like they go together. And then I always said the second lesson I learned was that continuity doesn't matter at all, because it doesn't really, what matters, you know, is like the feeling, the scene, whatever. So there's an element of it's very important to have a defined process. And then the second stage of that is every process is a little different because people are a little different. And so, working in the news space, like I worked for ABC and I worked for Yahoo and these places, and the show I work on now, I got very accustomed to the producers wrote the show, wrote the thing, handed it to you, said put this together and call me when it's done, and you come in and then they read along and listen. They're not even looking at the screen. They're like, okay, we'll cut this bite, cut that bite. Okay, now you figure out the B-roll. And that's how you make news for the deadline, for the 6 o'clock show or whatever, is there's a certain figure it out. It's very deductive. It's very this is what we're going to do, and now you put it together. And then, I like the deductive. I like to think that way about things. I like to sit back and go, okay, well, what should this be? All right, let's make that thing that we sort of figured out. And then Justin I would tend to be a lot, I think, like Jen. It's so interesting the way you two guys were juxtaposing. I would sort of say, I really like how Jen thinks about this. And Justin would be very much identified with Shane. He'd very much be like, we're looking for some magic here. We're looking for some feeling. We got to kind of look at this. And he's I would call it inductive. And so he and I have always had this tension in how we work and how we communicate. And it's more peaked, maybe the difference is more peaked between us than maybe other people that I work for. But that meant that in this process, we're going to kind of try to think about what the movie is at the outset. But then there was a lot of we know this is important, this scene, this event that took place. Why don't you just cut something of that and let's see what's there. And then that'll help tell us, is it important? And then what should follow it? And so, we had, this is an estimate, about 1,100 hours of footage. Justin shot everything for 3 years. He would go in the studio with 2 cameras, and for 4 or 5 hours, basically any day that Narcissus was there, if you've seen the film, Tim's kind of mentor character. Anytime he was in town, he would come in town for several weeks at a time to work. He would just go kind of every day and shoot more or less all day long. And then the guys would hang out afterwards, they'd work late, they'd get a drink. Justin would be there, he'd pull out his iPhone, and he'd shoot the conversation where they're just, whatever. And so he just would shoot and shoot and shoot. So so anytime anybody said anything interesting, inflammatory, drunk, whatever, it was he was rolling. And so we sat down and he said, I've been shooting for 3 years. I haven't had time to really watch everything. He did cut some pieces. Part of how they were paying for the film was the studio was having him do some marketing materials. So he'd cut things that were sort of in that vein. And so I'm coming in cold. So we'd have these we talked to a friend of ours who's a real accomplished doc filmmaker, and I kind of called him up. I said, just give me a little bit of advice. We're getting into this thing. And he said, well, at the beginning, he said, just get to the end of the movie, just put in cards for whatever, I'm going to need a bite here that says something, type it in and keep going, just throw the movie together. But he said, but maybe do one scene is important, kind of get that to work, and sort of so everybody will kind of see that and go, oh, okay, we can get our mind around that emotionally, great. So we were we'll do that. So we started with one scene. We said, well, the first day that Narcissus comes to work with Tim, let's do that. So that turned out to be a 90-minute cut. Maybe it wasn't that long. It was an hour and something. It was ridiculous. But it was just here's all this footage, because they shot, with 3 cameras all day long. They were there, and so that was the process of, okay, what's the next big important thing? So we just started cutting these important events because Justin was there. So we'd have these conversations. We'd get on the phone and he'd go, okay, well, so this is what happened at this place. They went to Bullseye and this thing happened, and we'd chat about it. And I'd say, oh, wait, what happened? And so, because I was totally virgin ears, so I didn't know. He would do, oh, this thing, and I was like, wait, hold up, that happened? And we'd have this sort of, he said this, and that sounds like something we should do. And I'm taking notes, and I'm trying to sort of put together some, so we'd have these sort of interactions. So that was kind of our process in terms of getting scenes, and then at some point put them all together, and it was 8 hours long. And we said, okay.
That's a little long.
Right.
For a feature-length documentary. Just,
right. And we were like, this could be a great series. And then we were like, well, so there's some other things I'll talk about in terms of what our process was of making choices then.
Yeah. We'll talk about making choices, but that's really interesting. It's so many different backdrops of how you guys start with your process. And then Luke, did you want to speak to this as well about receiving footage? Because I know you finished Bleeding Audio. You didn't start it, but I know you have other experience receiving footage.
Yeah, I think the first thing I do is I organize it in bins, and then because I like to think of documentary editing as organizing to the point of a story, and So I start that way, then I throw things into sequences as string outs, and then I cut out the questions so I don't have to watch as much. And then I watch things at double speed while I make a lot of markers, because I'm not good at Excel. Like, have always been very nervous about like taking notes, but markers seem to work really well for me. Those help me like later on in an edit too, because like clips look all the same, but if they've got a nice marker on it that says like a couple words, then I'm like, oh, okay, that's where that is. And oftentimes I'll like color code those things into things that are like story driven or data dumps or like human moments. And then those end up getting broken out too. So it's like also trying to separate them visually in the timeline from what they began as. And I find that makes it easier for my brain to like move things around if you actually like break them all apart. Because I get really attached to things that when they're in a spot, I'm like, well, I don't want to move it because I might have to put it back. So like getting over that fear very early helps like my creativity like kickstart easily. And I think only in your project where there was like lots and 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 lots of interviews and sequences and stuff did the project start to like get kind of sluggish. And so we definitely had to like go, okay, well, I don't need this sequence anymore ever, and trim things down. But yeah, that's kind of like my process.
Don't worry, Jen, it's backed up somewhere. It's backed up. Don't
it's
worry.
all backed up. There was lots of projects marked date and with your initials.
I think the project file got to being like 60 megabytes. It was.
Oh, that's nothing.
That's
Come
it?
on.
I think
Oh, okay.
It only was 110
Too bad.
or something.
110?
I don't know.
I mean, you
Somewhere.
should pare it down. Like if we're talking Premiere, it's not good to have a project that's over like 75 because the autosaves take forever. It gets buggy. Like you do need to weed it down, but it's pretty easy to get over that point.
I had really wished that Productions existed when we got started on the film, or we would have built around that, but it didn't. Adobe Productions.
I don't think that any NLE, any editing software is truly built for documentary editing. Like they're built for, scripted stuff where it's, one format and a certain amount of footage, a certain number of sequences. Like documentaries are just orders of magnitude more complicated in an editing project than any other kind of media out there. And you have to be very disciplined about the way that you're bringing in your media, like not bringing in stills that are too big, because it so quickly will just eat up all the RAM of your machine and crash. I don't know. It feels like it's getting a little bit better with each iteration, but I felt that like whether it's Final Cut, Avid, or Premiere, like none of them are truly built for long form documentaries. And
so we need to write some open letters to these different programs and ask for documentary plugins that help make the programs
because we're
better.
such like high roller clients. They should definitely be listening to us.
I mean, we're all swimming in money here.
Yeah.
That's why you get into documentary filmmaking, is it's for the dollar bills.
Absolutely, there's no doubt.
I would say that, like, no, it is and genuinely as a point of like counsel to anyone who's getting into this. Whatever your process is for figuring out the story, there is no choice. At the beginning, you need to sit down and go, how am I going to organize this going forward? Not 1,100 hours of footage. But we had, okay, let's do one project for each month. And then, like, how am I going to sync it up front and all that? And that becomes, we didn't have an assistant editor. I don't know if any of you guys did. So, like, I had to make that part of just how I got through my days, right? And Justin helped some of that, but it was like, how, come up with a process and do it, because you'll pay the piper one way or the other. So
yeah, they will. That stuff will snowball.
Yeah.
Yeah. What I suggest, and I'm sure Steve is watching, director of 18 the Grand. Put them to work if you can put them to work. Like
the directors?
We had directors, and we had a fantastic I don't even know what credit to give her. I know she has multiple credits on the film, but Mary McAnulty, she's our AE. She's our sort of graphics liaison / VisFX person / media everything / tech person, everything. And she wore so many hats on this thing. It was incredible, and she deserves a ton of credit. In fact, she even should get some edit credit on this, to be honest, because she helped patch some holes at the end when I was no longer available. So any chances you have to put people around you to work, especially the directors like this, it helps us kind of get on the same page too. Like Steve was really amazing at, I sort of helped kind of get him to poke through Final Cut Premiere, and just learn the basics of how to kind of put sequences together and group ideas and clips. And he did a great job of that. Which, I mean, it could have gone in a disastrous direction, but given the nature of everyone sort of like starting with Steve and Mary, just like putting their, I don't know, really kind of being dedicated to getting this right. They really put their worker hats on and got their hands dirty, which is really cool, because a lot of times people don't want to touch the edit. They don't want to go anywhere near the edit.
Right.
The program, they don't want to have to learn something new, but it helps a ton.
And just like speaking as a director, I think it's so important that if you're making a documentary film as a director, you need to learn Premiere. It's very important that you support your editors, especially if you're working on a low to no budget. Because I was the assistant editor, like on my film too. I have an encyclopedia brain, and I just like was able to keep track of everything. I know when I was working with Jen, she'd ask me where things were, and I'd organize all the B-roll and stuff for her. And then when I was working with Luke, he would ask for a certain statement, and I would find it through transcripts and through the interviews. And so it's just like, as I think too, and this is kind of what I want to talk about, is like the narrative responsibility between an editor and director in documentary film. I think, documentary editors have so much narrative freedom, I feel like, in collaborating with directors, because we do really rely on you guys to be that second voice in telling this story. And I know for me, when I came to Jen, I mean, I knew, I was like, I'm in deep. I am in deep. I need you to like look through this and tell me what you see. This is what I see. And I gave her my timeline. I gave her like all the, information about the band and the digital industry story that I wanted to tell. And I just kind of like left her alone for a bit. And I mean, honestly, Jen's initial assembly for Bleeding Audio exists today, like in the edit. Like that skeleton is still the thing that keeps the movie, moving. And so if you guys can all kind of speak to working with your directors and what that story collaboration was like. And I didn't, Jen and Luke, if you want to talk about it too, we're speaking to everybody, not just to me.
Yeah, but I mean, it's so different director to director too. I mean, there's some directors who, I would not trust to play around in Premiere, and I can't see them, wanting to, take the time to learn the software. That like, it would be fine with me if they didn't do that. And then like with our collaboration, it was awesome that you did know the footage so well, and that you did have, know your way around Premiere too. Like that, it's both scenarios are good. I think sometimes it feels like there's something nice about just being able to present a scene to the director when you haven't gone, like when they haven't been in the edit room that much, and they can be truly objective to what they're seeing. And then there's also the like these ideas that come out of being in the same room and working really intensely with the director too. Like I don't think there's necessarily one way to do it. I think it depends on the director's bandwidth and creative process. So I don't think there's one model to hold up. That's a good one.
That's a great point. Actually, that's a great caveat, but like it doesn't fit for every creative relationship by any means. Yeah.
When we went into it, Justin had been cutting stuff in Premiere and had cut segments and scenes and fundraising trailers, and so he knew the footage, and there were things we went back and pulled. He's like, I cut something like this, let's go pull the thing that I cut last year or something. But the idea was, Justin will sort of do some of that, do some work, and I'll sort of bring what I bring to it. And what we figured out pretty quick was it didn't seem to be the flow for this rodeo. What actually though was what Justin did was he was the one that ended up watching every piece of footage and making massive and copious notes. And so we had these like hundreds and hundreds of page long Word documents. And so then I would be like, what I think would really help here is if somebody said, and he'd be like, I think I have that, and then we'd pull it out, and then, he'd send it to me and we'd pull it together. And so, yeah, it is just about the chemistry of, and I think if Justin and I made another film tomorrow, the chemistry might be different because it could be a different story. But he had shot this thing, and I wasn't involved in the production process, so it would have been different too if, like, I had sort of been involved every couple of months for the 3 years when they were filming, coming in to edit stuff or look at things. You go, you really got to try to get something more. That wasn't part of the process, and that can be if you have the budget for it, right? But he didn't have that, so he was just trying to get the thing in the can. And our movie, of course, we had a ticking clock. We knew that it was a 3-year movie, and you knew at the end of it that they were either going to have succeeded or not succeeded or in some fashion. So that was helpful because it was like, well, we know that at least gives us a plot. Doesn't mean it's gonna be a great film, but it's at least it's a spine we can start attaching limbs to, and I think that it was just again a lot for me. It was a lot of I was the objective guy. I didn't know anybody. Justin had become very good friends, frankly, with Tim and Narcissus, and a relationship with David, and a relationship with Quinn. All these guys, he was part of like the crew. So. At the end of the film, there's a scene where they we're all toasting that the window's going out. Well, right after we cut out of it, Justin, get in here. He was part of sort of the thing. So he knew he had it all baked in his brain. He was there, and I didn't. So we had a lot of these, I mentioned before, but a lot of these tell me what happened. He would talk for a while. I'd be taking notes, and that was sort of a way to get some kind of perspective on it for him too, because he only could see it what he had known, and I'm another guy coming in going, well, that's interesting, or that's not, or I really like this, or I don't. So,
as a director, it really is hard when someone says, oh, this part is not interesting. And you're like, but I was there. I felt it, And
but a lot of times what that is there's something I don't know yet. And maybe it's not information. It might be a feeling that we just haven't found yet in the editing. And so that friction, those fights, is where stuff happens. It doesn't have to be a fight, but it can be I really think we got to cut the dead weight, and it's like, yeah, there's something there, and I don't know how to say it, but we're going to find it. And at 11 o'clock at night, you sort of bang your head against the wall for a while, and something starts, and you watch it again, then you're like, oh, I'm starting to see it now.
Yeah.
So
I do love that. I love that idea of a director saying this moment's really important and it not resonating. But I love that it's kind of the editor who can go into the edit and find ways of making that moment relevant to the edit, or maybe it's not. It's finding all of the little storytelling pieces to make that moment land. But Shane, I wanna hear your process in collaborating with the director on that narrative and where that kind of push and pull had come in your process.
Yeah, well, with Steve particularly on this film, it was really easy. He and I, the good thing was we gelled from the beginning. From our first meeting at a coffee shop, we were sort of talking about it. He was kind of interviewing me for the gig, and immediately we just sort of started. The movie wasn't in the can yet fully, but we just started to kind of spitball on ideas and how we would tell it visually, and I don't know how many of those actually made it to the end, but there was just a general connection we had creatively that I think he trusted me with the film. I didn't have a lot of feature doc experience at that point at all, so it was kind of a long shot for him. But he, I don't know, I think we just kind of, one of the things he did is he trusted me to do whatever the hell I did. I don't know, to be honest, I just sort of did my thing, and he supported it and kind of steered it. So I think there wasn't really a lot of friction. There was definitely moments where, we would come to a head on, whether something was, certain people get the idea, like you said, there's an idea in their head, this has to be in the film, this has to be in the film. And you get back to the drowning kittens thing. I wrote it down so I remember it. But you kind of have to fight those battles and keep fighting them. Sometimes you'll fight them for months. and then eventually one of you might acquiesce, or one of you might come to the other side, or and you might both agree one way or the other. But I think this process was relatively easy. There was really, I think a lot of it was because there was just trust, I think, in I was given space to do my thing, and I trusted the fact that he could go through the film and go through and find moments that we didn't have yet, or he had that encyclopedic knowledge of the stuff, in a way that he was kind of the story producer in that way, being like, I need this, and Mary, of course, is there something around here? And then they would dig around and they'd find some stuff. And so I think it was just kind of the three of us kind of worked really well together in that way. And it just kind of
Awesome.
it's kind of its own thing. It wasn't, there was no, there's no real rails we were on when we made this. It was kind of like, it was new for all of us, really. So it just kind of happened. I think it's just something that happened, and
I love it.
So,
Luke, did you have
that makes
anything that you wanted to add about collaborating with the director?
Yeah, I know that
For better, for
like
worse.
everyone's kind of covered all the like topics for how you can work. There's lots and lots of different ways. I think it's like really, I just try to match, find a way to gel with somebody. That's because it's a very creative working relationship, and like most relationships are going to have to get through certain bumps, and speaking directly to Bleeding Audio and you, I mean, we've worked together lots before, and so like we kind of had like fights that were bigger fights in the past on earlier things where we both had egos, and I'd say by this one we like buried a lot of egos and like would just approach things more sensibly. I find that I use the term like hill to die on quite a bit sometimes, and it's like, well, do I really want to die on this hill about like this particular thing when I've got like so many of these things that I like? Like, so everyone gets a win. No one's going to come out unscathed sometimes. So
I think at times too, Luke, you refer to it as like the sacrificial lamb. Like if I give up this
Sure.
scene, then I'm gonna fight
Yeah.
for these three other
like,
ones.
it's like a union negotiation sometimes where it's like, well, I'm just going to delete this if you
Horse trading.
Yeah.
It's a great way to make a film.
But the thing about that is the humility, is the going like, you know what, like I think I know what's going on here, but actually what's going on, either I'm wrong or it's changed, because the film is talking to me the whole time and I'm chipping away at the marble or whatever, and like the film doesn't look the same way when I get down to the statue that I thought it was going to.
Yeah.
That seemed like a great idea, and that being open to that process of the film talking to both of us or three of us or whoever your team is, like, hey, we both might need to, like, you might be right or I might be right about this particular, but if we step back for a second, what's the movie? And then also, like, why do you love that thing? What's it doing is a question. We're talking about, well, what is it doing? Why is it there? What train are you riding? What wave are you surfing at this point in the story? And does that follow? Because a good movie, picks a story and tells it, and we could easily have made a miniseries out of this story. Whether people want to watch 8 hours about Glass, I don't know, but they're really enjoying 2 hours about it. So I guess maybe. But it was like we have to make some choices about what the story we're going to tell is, and that is where Justin would say, "This is the kind of movie I want to make. This is what it's going to be." And like I'm not. If I was directing it, I would have a different road. So as an editor, there's a part of you that goes, "Okay, my job is to figure out what you're seeing and how to get it for you." But on the other hand, to kind of go, hey, I think maybe your vision needs to be tweaked. And that just requires receptivity on both parts. It's a relationship. It's like being married. It's like solving anything. You have to sort of like figure it out,
Yeah, I like that you kind of compared it to a marriage, because I really do feel like it is that way, where you're like, we're in this together. We need to work on the hard stuff and the easy stuff. It's a relationship, and it's a really powerful one, especially in documentary film. And so something that I wanted to kind of transition to is we have three very similar but different movies. We have Holy Frit, which is kind of a verite film, honestly. There's not very many talking heads interviews, and if they are, it's done in this studio. And I'm realizing now we didn't introduce what these films are about, but Holy Frit that Ryan cut together is this crazy character story about these two genius. I mean, actually, you know what, Ryan? Why don't you tell us what it's about? But my next question is going to be about character and about how you guys insert character into your narratives, because and I'll just overview the other films before I start with you, Ryan, and go to the other ones. But like, we've got, you know, Holy Frit, which is mostly verite about these two characters and their team, and we've got 18th and Grand, the Olympic Auditorium, which, you know, is the story of a place with so many other characters that are intertwined with this place, but it's, you know, it's about this, you know, this legacy of this building. And we've got Bleeding Audio, which is the story of a band, and it's, you know, it's about all of the characters within this band and their journey. And so character is something that's so, you know, so critical and scripted. And so in documentary, can you guys talk about, you know, choosing your characters, but also how you tell your characters' stories, whether it's a place or a person? And we'll start with you, Ryan.
Well, so Justin, with the help of some other brilliant people, came up with a great description for the film on the Slamdance page. I can't remember what it was, the log line. Trying to find it. This is Tim is an artist. This character's named Tim. He's a talented but unknown artist in Los Angeles, and he bluffs his way into getting the commission for the largest stained glass window of its kind ever made for a massive church in Kansas, and lands the deal, and then figures out, I don't really know how to make this window, but there's like this one guy out there whose name is Narcissus, and he's a glass genius, maestro, Italian, white hair guy. He's out there. If we could go find him, he'd know how to help us. And, you know, everything that happens after that. So that's sort of the setup, and that's the great marketing pitch now that the film has. When we were talking about this film, when Justin told me, I'm going to start shooting this documentary, these guys are making this big window. This is like 14 or 15. We're sort of chatting, you know, this is what it was. Well, there's this 5th generation family business. They were started by this guy, like 5 generations. They've held in this little studio, and they make stained glass. You know, the stuff that's 1,100 years old. Like, it's really beautiful, and they do this, and they just got the job to make the biggest window in the world. And so we're making a doc about that. I'm like, okay. And so that was sort of the starting point. And I sort of was chatting before I was involved. I was like, do you have characters? Because I don't know if, like, hey, we're going to make a stained glass window. Nobody's done that except every day for 1,100 years. Like, you know, is that going to, like, be a hook? Is anyone going to watch it? I don't care if it's a good movie, like, can, you know, get in the door. And so, like, yeah, well, no, there's this guy. I think he might be the protagonist. Okay, this guy's the main artist, you know. So, fast forward to the whole thing. We got into the movie, and there was right out of the gate, day one, we were talking about, you know, we're making a movie about this company trying to do this, right? And so there's all these characters in the company, and Justin's followed, you know, and there were great stories about all these different people. I mean, there was so much legacy in this place. It's like kind of in the wood. The building is like 100 years old. It was actually the USC School of Fine Arts. It started in this building. Like, that's what the building was. And there's all this family legacy stuff, and I'm thinking, like, oh, it's going to be a lot of archival. It's going to be about, like, a family, and we're trying to figure that out, you know. And the question right out of the gate was, how do we not make this just, you know, Bach and slow motion shots of beautiful windows? Because it's not the movie that we wanted to make. All right, Justin was a rock and roller by trade before he became a filmmaker, so this was not the movie he wanted to make. But also, like, we were like, that's not going to sell. You know, it's not interesting. What are we going to watch? So that was like the whole time you're going, how do we not make this just about, oh, it's just pretty glass? Because the glass is beautiful and it is breathtaking. And when I finally went there in person, I was like, I've seen hours of footage of this stuff. Looking at it up close, it really is like moving. But, you know, so we're from square one, and it was like, and what we figured out is as we started to cut things together, we knew whenever Tim was on screen, we said, okay, the movie's working. Like, I know what I'm watching, I'm interested, you know, like, we can roll with it. So that was this process of sort of like this, okay, we knew he was kind of the protagonist, but we had all these structure conversations about what kind of movie is it, you know, and it became clear that it was Tim's story. He was the character with an arc. He was the one that's dynamic. And so we were constantly saying, the glass is awesome, but it will not carry us. What will carry us is caring about the protagonists, whatever. Like, you make an action film, it's great that you've got a big stunt where a guy falls out of a building, but Bruce Willis, the character that John McClane, makes Die Hard work, right? Like, how many action films have been made with great stunts? And it's like, we have a great set of stunts, and that's beautiful, but like, so at some level, it seems basic, but it was like, we knew it was not a topical movie. We knew it had to be a character story. So that became the thing. So then
you literally got a guy named Narcissus.
What?
And then you literally got a guy named Narcissus to just like kick down the door.
He's great. Narcissus is a great guy. But one of the things that was fascinating about Tim is Tim's going to watch this. He would tell you what was going on here. And so if he was in a bad mood, or he was upset, or he was happy, or he was it came out right here. So he was just completely transparent. And so that was beautiful, because you were like, in Unscripted, you want someone to tell you what's really going on, and like, he's telling you what's really going on in here. And so you're like, well, great. And he's just such an expressive guy. So the point is, we're kind of, what kind of story is it? We're trying to figure out this arc. So then we're sort of getting into, okay, we know that it's this journey, and we're trying to figure out what the beats of his arc are. And then that's how we started backing into what lives and what doesn't live, when we were taking this 8-hour meandering collection of interesting events and trying to say, what follows.
I love that. That's so interesting, because I feel like that's a similar process that was done actually on Bleeding Audio. Is it felt like this huge story, which is what you had, Ryan, is you had this huge story of, it's this, historical making of this giant window, and you've got these interesting characters. But like, when you have this piece of footage, I think what's really interesting is when you're narrowing it down, it comes to just that human connection and the humanity of our characters. And like, Jen, can you chime in and talk a little bit about character and
I mean,
a foundation, and then Luke, you can pick up after too, because that was a huge part of the process.
It's comes up a lot in like social issue documentary projects that I work on, because you frequently will have there's obviously all these like seemingly intractable problems that we're trying to solve, like racism, child abuse, musicians not getting paid for their work, and the ways that our brain works, like, we can't just like tell people about the scale of the problem and expect that will do anything for them, change anything about their behavior or their thinking. It's really this attachment to individual characters and going on a journey with them, like seeing them face obstacles, seeing them transform over time. That is what long form documentaries do and can only do, right? There are certain things that just can't be accomplished in like a 2-minute viral video. Like that attachment to character is everything. Some things that I think about, especially when there's in any feature-length documentary, presumably you're going to have multiple characters. I try to really write out in the beginning, like before I have a structure idea in mind, of like, what is the most unique thing about each character, and really try to dial the volume up on that, so that like, we're not in this danger zone of like telling the same story more than once. So trying to be mindful of that. And then also when we meet someone for the first time, to have a character moment with them, like this moment where you are hooked, you are charmed, you are like tuning in to them before they say something that's really otherwise relevant to the story. But to have a particular moment with them where you get that moment to be attached before you take them wherever you want to go.
Yeah, and still, my favorite part of Bleeding Audio is the introduction of our character John in the film, which is simultaneously a guitar solo and him tap dancing competitively. And it's like those kind of character moments are so crucial in documentary. Luke, did you have anything you wanted to add about character? And then Shane, I have questions for you about character as well.
Yeah, I try to like really mark the moments where like other people are talking about other folks, because like you really learn about a character by like what other people are saying about them sometimes. And trying to find like human moments like where they're not kind of prompted by something. They just kind of are existing, and you get a sense of who they are very quickly. Those moments go a very long way. Like you'll find it in a B-roll moment, or like where they're being followed by a camera or something. But yeah, those I've never thought to write them down, which is really smart. uh, but you try to
Ryan,
like
you may
tune
have
into
fixed
those
Luke's
things.
editing. Give him,
Nothing to
make
fix.
him take the notepad, write those down.
Put it on the whiteboard.
No,
Yeah,
I'm teasing
but then
you.
when you find those moments where they're like characters end up bouncing off each other, I find that like it makes the story better overall, because you're finding like cross-pollination and like people's brains start to work at how these things interact in a larger story. So yeah, those are the moments I look for.
Awesome. Great answer. I think that it's so interesting too, because you're handling real humans and like real human moments out of their lives, and having the ability, Luke, you know, like you're saying, to scrub through and see what other people are saying, or see a quiet moment that they have that, you know, that is just so human, is so critical in documentary to really understand what's going on with these, you know, people as they're living their lives. You know, it can feel I don't want to say invasive, but it's so much more personal when you can find those moments.
Yeah, you almost like have to detach yourself from them as people and like start to caricature them, like give them the Ned Flanders treatment where you're like, you're just the Oakley Dokley guy.
I love it. And so Shane, your film has an interesting aspect of character too, because your film is about, you know, a place and the people who occupied that place. And can you talk about the character conversations you had with your director in constructing this?
Yeah, that's a really interesting thing, because clearly one of the first conversations Steve and I had was, you know, his I'm like, what is this movie? You know, what do you see this movie as? And basically I think it was like, it's a movie about a building, and it's about a woman who ran the building, and it's about 4 different sort of completely different worlds that existed within that building, and it's also about the time, you know, the time, the 40 years of that building. You know, there's so many dynamic you know, elements at play that like clearly or very quickly it was, you know, I was able to realize that this was going to be tough, because I mean, there's just so much to tell. And how the hell do you tell? First of all, yeah, it's like, you know, Ryan, to the stained glass, you know, it's the same idea that, you know, it's a great story, this building in itself, but you need this emotional human connection. And everyone else has talked about this very specific. You need that emotional connection to get into, why the hell do I care about this? And the only way through is by connecting to, usually, and unless somebody does something very uniquely different, is through human connection. What's that? You need to connect to a person to sort of, you know, in a way, maybe just live vicariously to be able to connect to that subject material. So I think a lot of our struggle was really dialing down how, first of all, what we have to call this down to one story arc if we can. We have to tell a story, and all the other stuff has to connect to it, but you have to be able to have a through line to connect from A to Z. And we realized very quickly that Eileen Eaton, our protagonist, and our main, you know, she ran the bit, like it's really her story. I mean, it's an LA story. It's a story about Los Angeles. There's so much to it, right? The building itself is this theater of the violent, right? It's this kind of focal point of this, almost an energy vortex for sort of violence in a way. It's really just kind of, that was the initial kind of thing. And I think we tried to keep that theme from our first conversation all the way till we finished the movie. And I think that still comes through, hopefully. But
Oh yeah, I mean, not to interrupt you, but like in watching it, there's a section about roller derby, and both my husband and I turned to each other and were like, "Is roller derby supposed to have this much blood and punching and like just absolute violence?"
Right.
So,
I mean, I don't think we're there for the roller skating.
Yeah, well, it was wrestling on wheels at the time, right? It was just kind of this big, what's the word for it? Just kind of a spectacle sport. It's become more technical over the years, and people that play it now, it's more of a sport than it was the spectacle. But the whole place was a spectacle, and there's so much to see and tell, so many different individual stories to tell within it. But we found, quickly we learned that we had to stick with this Eileen Eaton story and really tell her, because her story alone is incredible, and I think it needs to be told in a scripted series or something. I think it could be really, really dynamic, and I know that's been attempted in the past. But we had to, and Steve couldn't have picked a harder movie to make for his first feature. I mean, he couldn't have. I mean, it was such a huge undertaking to be able to cull this down to a single trackable story. And the other thing we ran up against was that the stunning lack of archive of this woman is incredible. Like we kind of used everything that we possibly could find, and they dug, Mary and Steve dug deep, as deep as you could get to find archive of her. She for who she was and what she did, there was an incredible lack of material, and I think we used every frame and every piece of archive we could to tell it. So that was really a struggle too. It was like, we got to keep her in the film, but there was kind of this huge gap that we had to kind of, there are gaps in the movie where we're like, we need to keep her in this era, and part of it was like she'd poured it off. Eileen in the film, she gives one of her sons, basically she gives him wrestling. So he's running the wrestling promotion, and she really didn't have a lot to do with the wrestling promotion herself directly. So we kind of had to find ways to keep her involved in the story when we went off to tell this story, so that was kind of, and we had to do it. One of the first things, the mantra we had throughout the film was service the story. Like, we have to be honest to the thing, because it's really easy as an editor, especially, to start playing with ideas and making what you want the movie to be through Frankenbites, through, you want to tell this you want this really convenient turn in the film to happen, and so you make it happen. And it's really easy to fall into that trap and be disingenuous and do something that's not servicing the story. And so we found ourselves in those traps at times, and we had to pull back and rework it and sort of say, okay, what's the natural, authentic way to tell this, because we don't want to lie. You know what I mean? We don't want to tell something that's, you can sort of, there's a fine line you got to ride, because you got to keep it entertaining. You've got to keep the story trackable, and you can sort of embellish in places, I think, but in the end, you've got to tell. Your job is, you're not a journalist per se, but I think in a way you have to put on your journalism hat and just be honest about what's happening, so that, I think that's kind of the thing we ran up against too, was really just trying to, because it felt like we're trying to shoehorn her in here where she doesn't fit. So we had to kind of leave her for a while and hope that when we came back to her, that we hadn't disappeared for too long. So that was kind of our biggest problem.
Yeah, well, and for what it's worth, like it was very clear as a viewer who didn't know anything about the auditorium. It was very clear that she was that through line. Like, it felt very strong, and
thank God.
Thank God. And I mean, and this is the challenge that we all face as documentary filmmakers. And it's actually, you brought up a point that I did want to touch on, which I think is so interesting, because I've had a lot of, our film Bleeding Audio has a bit of a built-in fan base with the matches. And I've had a bunch of people ask questions of like, oh, well, that doesn't happen then, that happened later, or, there's a bit of timeline questions. And the truth is, documentary film, while it is documenting real life, there are narrative licenses that have to be taken in order to tell a really great story. No matter what, documentary is still told with a point of view, it's the essay where you're making your point and you're like, this is my opinion, here are the facts, but it's still expressing a certain feeling or thought. And so I really find that interesting that that you ran up against that too. It sounds like Ryan, you guys had that as well, of just like honing in on that perspective. And so I don't want to take too much of anyone's time. So I'm going to wrap up with a couple final questions that should be a little easier for you guys to answer. I know I've been getting into the nitty gritty, and you guys have had so much wonderful stuff to say. I could seriously have this go on for 3 hours, but I'm not going to do that to you. But what I really want to ask too, and this might seem a little trite, but like, what is a scene that you're proudest of in these films that are at Slamdance right now, or a moment that you really felt like was an amalgamation of like your skills as an editor, as a collaborator, and just as a storyteller? And, you know, what do you feel you brought to the table to make that a successful scene? Whoever wants to go
no
first.
pressure.
First, no, I can't.
I'll go first. It was the cut from Act 2 to Justin Pierre just sitting there and not thinking about anything. That was my favorite cut in the whole movie. I also want to give one to Shane, which is like, Shane, I thought it was great that you got the like 2 or 3 shots of her at a piano, like time to like music beats. And I was like, well, they just pulled like some shots of her sitting at a piano and it made it work.
Well, thank you very much. Yeah, that's one of those moments. Thank you for that. That's one of those things that I think is really cool when this film speaks to you about what it is. Like that was a moment where the archives started showing up in these kind of bursts, and we'd sort of have these sequential, you know, sort of action moments, I guess, if you will. And we found these ways to kind of make that part of the visual, kind of the tone and the aesthetic, where we had enough of them throughout the film to kind of give it that. We were trying to make it kind of a theme. And thanks for pointing that out. That was fun. That's just one of those things that happens, and I think it just happened. It wasn't like a, you know, if you listen, it tells you.
Take ownership of it, Shane. Come on, stop brushing it off.
Thank you.
Okay, who's next? Ryan?
Oh man. Gosh, I'm trying to think if I was to sit down. I watched it just the other night, and I'm trying to remember what are the moments. I think the scene that felt like it was such a gift that we sort of, because we kind of cut these scenes. I think the first one we cut Narcissus like as Narcissus' first day kind of coming in, and then we cut their first trip to Bullseye, which was like, there was a whole like arc and like conflicts and beginning, middle, and end of this 5-day sojourn up there where Tim goes through all this stuff, and anyway, ends up as a short scene in the film, of course, because that's one of those things. But one of the things that we then go, there's a scene where they made the face of Jesus. Oh yeah, okay. No, but like they made it a second. Then they made it the second time. Oh, okay. And so some of this stuff on the cutting room floor. But they're like, there's a scene that make the face of Jesus, and they have this whole thing. So Justin just gives me like, here's all the scenes with the dates where that happened. There's a bunch of cool B-roll here. So I go away for a couple of days and I work on it. And I come back and there's all this like stuff there. You know, they're making the face of God, and there's like everything comes up. And so, like, it was like this 60-minute edit, and we were like, all's coming to a head right here. And the thing also, like, is visually, like, it is the weight of the window in terms of the center. The whole window kind of visually hangs on this one panel, and so it did things on a bunch of levels, like sort of practically. You were like, oh, that feels important. And then Adam was going to come look at it, and you're like, So there was all this sort of convenient convergence of plot and character. So I don't know if it's right to say I'm the most proud of it, but it's one of the things that stands out in the film. We always knew that was sort of the pivot point of the movie, and one of the things that was really fun was Justin early on was like, I want to do a scene where we build something out of breaking glass, musical, percussive. And so it was like, always like, yeah, we're going to have to get to that. We got to figure the story out. We'll get to that. And then towards the end, he's like, so now we need to do it, Ryan, so we, okay, I'll find all these shots of sort of culling through for all the cool, and we built this little thing, of course, when they come back, if you've seen the movie, they come back from the first installation, and it's this thing, and they work with the composer who then took all the samples, and that was kind of fun, because it's a very, like, edity thing, and it was, like, cool and nifty. I think the thing that I enjoy the most whenever I watch it was probably Quentin standing up at the end. Last time I wore this suit was in front of a judge, and he was kind of hooked on drugs at the beginning, and at the end he's an artist, and you're kind of like, well, that's the guy that I'm like excited about as a viewer, you know, because he, more than Tim, you know, Tim was kind of okay, and Tim's better now, but Quentin was like not okay, and now he's really, and so that was exciting. Those aren't scenes. Those are. I'm doing a terrible job answering your question.
No, this is great.
That kind of stick to me, you know.
Because all those moments are so powerful. I mean, I still remember when they're like presenting. So in Ryan's movie, not trying to spoil, but they're presenting to their client essentially, and I think it's Narcissus who says, "What if they don't like it?" And it's just like, I never even thought about that moment, and I was sitting there like, "Oh my God, what if they don't like it?" You know, and it was just like a crazy moment of tension, and that's like what editing is, right? Is it's moments of like tension and release, tension and release.
That moment though, like what happens, we basically is uncut. Like we compressed a little time, but it's like Tim sort of joking about it and brushing. It was like it epitomized the plot and the characters in like this one crappy iPhone shot. That was my moment. You know, I got excited about that moment too.
So great. It was
very
so good.
easy to relate to as an editor too. Like, you know, you've spent all this time constructing this thing. Will they like it? Yeah.
Jen, did you have anything that you wanted to add about any moment in particular that you were like, yeah, this is the thing I put into Bleeding Audio?
Yeah, I mean,
the skeleton really.
The opening sequence basically, I think is pretty close to like very early versions of what we cut, right? So
yeah,
you know, we obviously we had this hump to get over in the film of like, you know, we're making this film about this, you know, a beloved cult band with a rabid fan base, but it's a fairly small fan base. You know, it should be bigger, as like the film proves. But you want to, you know, have the film be relevant to people who know nothing about the band. And so how do you make people care if they're not already fans? And, you know, that's kind of relevant to any story that you would be trying to tell. Like it's something that I wear like a hair shirt every day. It's like, just assume that nobody cares. Assume no one gives a shit what you're trying to say. And you have to hook them. You have to romance them and prove so quickly that this is relevant to them. And so there are all these Matches fans that have tattoos of, you know, different lyrics or, you know, like the band itself. And that became this symbol of like how, like what the band means to some people. And as they say in this opening sequence, like they are not like a tattoo clad band. And so there's something about like this disproportionate number of Matches fans having tattoos, and how weird that felt for the band. But it proved this point of like, there's something that's so special about this band that people would be, you know, permanently marking themselves with their lyrics, etc. And to have that as part of the opening sequence with this, you know, really gorgeous like slow-mo concert footage that existed, it felt like the right, you know, note to start on, and it survived.
Yeah, it really did. And then Shane, did you have anything that you wanted to add of just like a little Shane stamp that you have in your edit that you're like, yeah, not the one Luke picked for you, the one that you picked.
I was gonna pick that moment, man.
Oh, you were?
I'll pick more for you if you want.
Please do. I'm bad at this. No, but I think it's the general feeling of the film it was definitely my strengths coming from music video side, and I tend to be extremely frenetic, and overly cutty, and just you know, a little crazy. So I think the fact that we were able to, although it kind of goes all the way through, it still has breath, you know, it has breath and pace that didn't get too crazy. I think we were able to kind of find that balance of like the energy and kind of, you know, because we had all this archive and all this, you know, a lot of crazy editorial. But I think just I think one of the things that Steve and I are both music people. Like Steve's very musical, and I think the whole thing was just this kind of musical ride through the whole film. I mean, it's very musically driven from the get-go, and I'm hoping we did that justice. I think we did. We kind of music's such a big part of it. I feel like marrying story to that general pace throughout and the rhythm of it all. I think that kind of the fact that we were able to do that. And the other thing I'd say is we actually as a group, figured out how to do this, and it wasn't just me editorially, but we were able to end the movie somehow. Because one of the things was like we had some real tough things. We were trying to tell these stories, and like we had to get this kind of punk rock era in after Eileen had already been dead, and we have to tell this kind of coda section, we called it, of the punk rock, you know, after all the other stuff had happened. But we still felt that that was a relative, you know, it was an important part of the history. So finding a way to get into that and get out of that and finish the movie with kind of an emotional lift and kind of the way John Doe kind of ends the film, and just basically, you know, they call it progress, and he ends with 2 middle fingers and you're out. I just felt like we did a great job of kind of putting a period on the end of the film, and yeah. I'm proud of that. So
that's the hardest part in making documentary films too, because, you know, you're capturing life. Like, where does the story end? Like, technically it doesn't. It's just this ongoing history. So, okay. One last question. Then I've got some Q&A questions from the audience that I'm gonna ask, which is really, you know, what there are people out there who are learning how to edit. I mean, love it or hate it, I don't understand it, but TikTok, like, kids are learning how to edit, and it's really interesting, and it's an exciting time, I think, for people who maybe didn't think about it as a craft or starting to learn about this craft. Is there anything that you would share with someone who is starting to learn and understand this art form, and, you know, how you would suggest they maybe think about it if they're going to get into it as a career?
My first thing I was going to say is to try to teach them to turn their phone this way. But I know I've already lost that, and the world has moved on. So
Yeah, that was
I'm just
dead.
going to leave.
It's too late to be curmudgeonly about vertical videos. I know, I try, but it's too late.
Yeah,
that
too
ship
late
has
on that
sailed.
train. Yeah.
I think the thing that, you know, I had a conversation with a guy who's just getting started about a week or two ago, and he was like, just tell me a little bit about, like, I want to become an editor, like, how do you sort of, we had this chat, and one of the things I said to him that it just sort of occurred to me, and I don't know, was I said, you know, you're not going to control the opportunities that come your way necessarily, but you do control being ready for them. So, you know, and it's hard to sort of to get started in the business right now during COVID, because you can't just go, like, intern somewhere, you know, there's nobody's in the office, and you can't do those things. And so it's like, if you want to do this, you have to just start doing it, you know. And this advice has been given a million times, but it's like, just be doing something. And you're like, well, I don't have anything to work on. It's like, well, find something stupid to work on. Find something that, just be doing something so that you're building a muscle, building a thing, because you do not know how the fact that you just happened to cut that kid's iPhone skateboard video that was next door neighbor, whatever, like, in 6 months, somebody's going to say, I need someone that's cut a skateboard video. You can be like, well, I've done it. And, you know, or whatever it is that, you know, you don't know. So just get your feet in the water, and be doing something. Because it's like, you probably own a computer, and the software isn't that expensive, and you can, you know, you have a phone. So find a friend who wants everybody's always looking for an editor. There's always somebody looking for an editor. So just be like, if you're brand new, I'm not going to charge you much, but, like, please. And that was, you know, for me getting started, was I met some guys that were working on a pilot, and they had no money, and I said, please, can I come help you? I just, after work, I'll come down and help you. And that was like, that turned into my first job, and I thought I knew way more about editing than I did. I was an idiot, but, like, it was put tread on the tires.
Love that. That's great advice. Who wants to go next?
I know. I actually almost want to, you know, ask people in their early 20s, like, sometimes I feel very cynical about, like, long form documentaries, and, like, how much longer will this format last for, when there's, you know, just the saturation of media in, like, much shorter formats and all these other ways. But then, you know, year after year, these amazing projects come along, and there's certain things that can only be told with, like, more than an hour of runtime. And, you know, I work on, you know, shorter projects too, so not that that's, like, the be all end all format. But yes, absolutely, people always need editors. Like, there is always something that you can find to work on. And that might be different than like the thing that you can actually get paid to work on. And so like for me, it was a combination of, you know, finding those young filmmakers that needed editing help, and, you know, doing nights and weekend stuff for free, and then doing, you know, assistant editing stuff on stuff that I maybe didn't care that much about, but to do such an amazing job with that paying work, that wasn't maybe like creatively very interesting, but those people who are a few notches up above you see that you're doing an amazing job and say like, oh, she can do that. I wonder if she can do this. And just slowly getting more and more opportunities that way, proving how, you know, competent and interested you are in doing that project justice. So, you know, after a few years of that, you know, there was this, I don't know like how long that period was of like where I could like say, like introduce myself as an editor with a straight face, but you know, I got there. It's possible. If you enjoy it, you should absolutely do it, because I think it's really the minority of people that are working in media that truly enjoy editing. And they are, there are more directors and camera folks and producers out there than there are solid editors. It's a good, it's a good profession, a noble profession.
And it can be done socially distanced.
Oh God.
We invented.
Yeah, when everybody shut down, it was like there was a lot of stock jobs, but there's still jobs. Like,
Luke.
Yeah, I think I would just say to like diversify your learning. Like, it doesn't hurt to like read books about lighting. It doesn't hurt to read books about storytelling. It doesn't hurt to like watch tutorials on After Effects or design. Like it's all like things that will help you, because like filmmaking is a collaborative process, and you know, TikTok's the new hotness right now, but like TikTok's gonna get supplemented by something else. But like there's an underlying craft that like will always be there. Like if somebody told me to go make a TikTok, my first one would be shit, but like my second one would be good. Like
I love that. That's great. I was only bringing up TikTok because someone was kind of being a bit curmudgeonly about like, oh, now all these kids are editing, but it's like, no, it's like these kids are learning that like editing is a thing that you can do, and it can be really fun, you know?
I love TikTok editing. TikTok editing is brilliant.
Yeah.
There's a new,
yeah. I've seen some pretty amazing things. Like they're really getting into it, and it's I think it's exciting because I you know, I started in editorial. That's kind of my history, and I have such a respect and love of editors, which is one of the reasons why I wanted to put on this panel. So, you know, get them while they're young, get them while they're excited. Let's get more editors out there,
but not Shane, too many, so that they still hire us.
Yeah,
exactly, just the right amount.
Right, exactly. Yeah. Well, I think I agree with. There's a theme here, I think, where it's like you just got to get out and pound the pavement and work for free and do the stuff you don't want to do. I think that's just. I don't want to sound like an old curmudgeon who walked to school, you know, in the snow, uphill both ways, whatever. But I think it's really about you just got to get out and start doing it. I mean, it's like, you know, and you can prove. I got my first real job in LA from a news clip reel that I had from stuff I cut, and you know, in a different market that didn't have anything to do with this industry. And I think they saw that I could edit, and they could see the talent there to the point where they're like, oh, okay, we can trust him to do these little things and see how it goes or whatever. And I got really lucky in that way. And I think if you have the love for it and an interest and you have the talent, I think the cream will rise to the top on some level. But I think at the same time, it's like, I can't tell you how many free jobs, how many freebies I did over the year. Like, there's just, I think it's just part of it, and it just makes you better. LA or any industry really is just about connection as well. I mean, you're going to meet people along the way, and like Jen said, like you can work your way up. You know, in maybe in one company, they'll sort of start giving you more things and more. You know, they can see, and they'll sort of give you those opportunities, because one of the other things you run up against is that nobody wants to hire you to do the thing unless you've done the thing. So you've got to find a way to get that thing done. And a
Yeah.
lot of times that's just, it's really just doing it on your own, or, you don't have to go to school for it. I think like Robert Rodriguez had a saying back in the day, is like, if you want to make other people's movies, go to film school. If you want to make your own, just go make them, or whatever. I think something to that line, I'm paraphrasing, but you can, I mean, with the technology like we're talking about, and the resources we have, and I think it's all there. TikTok's like a language I don't understand, but it's a language. Like editing is also different languages. So I come from short form mainly. So this long form stuff for me is still really new in a way. And it's just a whole different way of storytelling, a whole different way of, so it's like diversifying, like Luke was saying, just like really kind of branch out and do as much as you can and learn to see what your strong suits might be, and just pound the pavement, I guess.
I
Love
want
it.
two things
Oh.
really quick.
Oh, yeah.
Number one, there was stuff that in the early days, Justin and I and some other buddies did where we kind of like, we're just going to make crap on the weekend. We had a camera and friends took turns acting, took turns. That stuff, like some of the things that we did in the early days for a dime and a favor was on my reel for years. And I think some of it may actually still be, because it was like, well, how are we going to do that color correction effect? We're in a formal house, or we're not going to pay you to figure that out. That's too expensive. We're going to go get the expert. Well, but there was nobody else, so I had to figure it out or whatever. And so like I learned to apply After Effects and color and all these things that, and then the other thing, because it was there and I had to figure it out. So you teach yourself things and you become more diversified, and suddenly you're in that house and you're like, well, actually I know how to do that. I actually do motion graphics principally right now with my current job, because I've always done After Effects, and so it's, do both, and that helps to keep me have a living. The other thing I'd say is advice I have not really taken, which is, especially if you're going to be in documentary editing, is but any kind of editing that's filmmaking, is go take writing classes. Maybe even take some acting classes. And I'm a terrible actor, and I don't really care for writing, but the little bit of acting class I took in college and the writing I should have taken, well, I did take a writing class, actually. I forgot. I took one writing class. But like, take more, because you're writing the movie. Right? I mean, sometimes you have a writer who's going to come in and hand you the script and say, edit this documentary for me, please. But you being able to constructively look at that and break it down, we're doing Holy Frit. It's like we were talking about it as if we were writing a narrative film. And, I'm lucky I married a writer. So my wife is at great level. She has a credit on the film because of all of her help in going, oh, well, what you're talking about is a hero's journey, and this needs to happen, and that's what's going on there. And so, like, being able to frame and talk about it helped us. I've rambled, but take a writing class.
It's super valuable.
That's awesome. Yeah.
Yeah,
That's really
we
cool.
actually, that's what Luke and I did in our final stage, is we did the hero's journey. We held it up side by side. And we were like, all right, let's go back to basics.
And watch Pixar making of, because Pixar movies are basically just a huge 5-year editing project where they just tear the movie apart and re-edit it and re-edit it and re-edit it. And they're
the best storytellers in the world.
Well,
like,
Lee
let's just be
Unkrich,
honest.
the commentary on Toy Story 3, Lee Unkrich is an editor, right? So I'm like, I relate to you. He's like doing this whole thing. He's talking about, well, this is what we thought the scene was about. And I'm like, that makes total sense, yeah. But then we figured out 3 years into it that it was actually about this. It's actually this character's moment. And you're like, oh. And yeah, anyway.
I love it. I'm going to move into our questions from the audience. I've picked a couple here. This is one that I feel like we kind of touched on, but if anybody wants to add anything else, the question is, how can a director who comes to you with a documentary to cut make your job as easy as possible?
Transcripts.
Good, fast answer, Luke. Love it. Anyone else?
There's never enough B-roll and verite. It just always feels that way. Like you need to, the things that connective tissue is always what you need to make like it. There are some things that like are going to end up in the film. Like there's such strong character story moments, but like to actually make them work, you need so much more like mortar between those bricks, and it just always feels like there's never enough of that. And you spend enough time in the edit to make it work eventually. You squeeze blood from stones, like you make it work. But if there was just a little more time spent shooting, the editing would actually go a lot faster. And so you end up spending more money in post when yeah. when like maybe you could have spent, you could have lingered more in production to get more adjacent stuff.
Always be
Good
filming.
B-roll will like always get you out of like tricky spots. B-roll like you can construct a whole scene out of good B-roll and good music. And like that can solve so many like logistical problems that you might find yourself in.
Yeah. And I have sympathy for why that doesn't happen, but it's always hard to say like, oh, I still need more.
Yeah. And walking in with a plan of some sort, it's really tough with documentary filmmaking, especially verite stuff, because you're kind of just fly on the wall and what happens. But as much of a plan going in that you can go in with to kind of structure this thing, it's going to change. But if you can sort of build yourself a little bit of a sandbox, rather than, because a lot of times this movie, luckily we didn't have this problem. A lot of times people will come in with however many terabytes of footage and be like, boom, make a movie, and that happens. I tend to work in lower budget stuff a lot. That
yeah, man, that sounds like job security.
Well,
it's not lower budget anymore, but it is.
That would be if somebody had money to do that. Yeah,
okay.
Like I've had to turn jobs away. I mean, to the point where it just became too much of a headache, where they're just like, make something, and I'm like, well, that's why going into this movie, I powwowed with Steve specifically, being like, I don't want this to be that process. And luckily he stepped up and really kind of made sure that we walked in with a lot more structure by the time I got my hands into it. So I think a lot of that is just prepare yourself, especially when you're giving it over to an editor. Make sure they have enough to work with, because you don't want to pay an editor for that time. You don't want to pay an editor to do AE work or, story producing work necessarily. I mean, you want them to be familiar with the movie, but there's a certain amount of, in my experience, I feel like you can save time and money by doing a lot of that legwork up front, just to kind of really organize and get things together.
I feel
but
like
in the end, I'd love to see every frame of footage myself also. So it's.
But I also feel like as a director, I feel like you should know what story you're telling when you go in and start filming, hopefully, and so then when you do hand it off to the editor, it can be, instead of just dropping the footage on their desk, it can be that collaboration that you guys have all expressed so well in this panel, which is like, hey, you know what, this is what I see, what do you see, and I think, I'm sure it's difficult, having a director come to you and being like, I don't know, here you go.
I love that. I actually love that so much. Yeah. No, I find that I mean, it puts more on us to do, but it's like, it's very satisfying to find the story, in like 300 hours of footage. And, usually that will mean that you have to do some pickup shoots to make it work. But, if there's the time and budget for that, and maybe that understanding up front, that would help. But I find that enormously satisfying.
I will amend my statement saying that I love to be able to play with things and really kind of just see with fresh eyes what it wants to be. That's what I had on the Stevie Nicks documentary. I had that freedom. Like, it's kind of a strange movie. It's like fan film or whatever, but it's like, there was this thing where I actually was employed, so I could just spend all that time and sort of, they gave me kind of carte blanche on however long it took to figure it out. And that was a great deal of fun.
Yeah.
Like, that was awesome.
But I mean, also,
so
like, if someone comes to you like without, any semblance of a structure idea, and they have hundreds of hours of footage, like, clearly there is something that has the hooks in them that has, propelled them to be with the project for that long, that they've amassed all that footage. Like, there's going to be something there. And if they're, so in love with their material that they can't see it yet, like, that's like, maybe that's a good problem to have,
Yeah, I mean, at some point you've got to be into the story as well. Like, as a filmmaker, we have to be into it, because it becomes a labor of love for everybody. Just because it's the nature of the beast with this stuff. It just has to be something that you have a passion for. Like, if your heart's not into it, it's just, you're either not going to survive the process, or you'll part ways, or you might be. It might.
I got into documentary editing for the notoriety and the glamour,
right.
And all the great questions you get at Q&As that people have for the editors.
I think that.
Yeah, Ryan, what about you?
Everybody has said everything I would say. And I think the thing that to keep in mind is anyone who's made a documentary, who's actually gone out on virtually no budget and followed an event with their camcorder and their buddy, and they're borrowed and they begged and they've raised money and they've done these things. They're driven by something. And I don't know, I don't want to speak for you guys, but I know that for me, I'm a very let me put these pieces together. I'm a Lego guy, right? So I want to put the blocks together, and I'm thinking about whether we need a 2 or a 3 here. And, Justin is, in my particular relationship, he's the big picture guy. He's the guy that says there's a story to be told, and I see it, and I don't know that I know all the words for it yet, and I don't know all what it's going to be, but I see the thing, and I'm going to call it into existence. And so I'm going to go to people, and I'm going to say, you should put money into this, because we're going to call something into existence that matters. So he's doing that. He's doing this sort of thing, and it's easy for me in my chair to go, oh, let me sort of armchair quarterback what you should have done differently, or well, we needed this block and not that one. Sometimes you go, hey, it would have been good if we'd had this and we didn't have it. But what's coming to me as you're talking is humility and listening, which you've noticed I'm probably not. It's ironic coming from me listening, but the ability to listen to somebody and to go, okay, what is it that you see? If you don't know how to say it yet, that's my job, is to figure out how to say it for you. So I'm going to shut up and listen until I start to get it. And try to help you, so there's a human part of it there of trying to affirm and call out the director's vision and say, okay, now I'm starting to see it. It's in this pile on the desk. Now I can start to put it together, because that's what I do well, and I'm not so great at going and calling the thing out and telling people you should put money into this so I think it's, it's some element of I said it.
No, that was great.
Knowing what you're...
that was so good, because I so feel that's that relationship with the editor where it's just here it is, this is what I see, help me see it better, help me tell it to everybody else. Cool. I'm going to move on. I've got 2 more questions, and then I know you guys are being so generous with your time. And so this is an interesting one. What sort of things do you do to help enhance your abilities, like meditation, yoga, exercise, beverages? Is there anything that you have in your daily routine that helps you be creative? Yeah.
I would lift up my laptop if I could right now, but it's just tethered to too many things. I got a walking desk treadmill. Because I was convinced that it was going to be too loud for editing, but then I saw footage of someone in this film that I was editing where they had a desk treadmill, and I'm like, I can barely hear that treadmill. I could get a treadmill. And I find that I can't do it for everything, but especially when you're watching footage, which is mostly passive process, it helps keep me more, alert and tuned in. Or if I'm pulling selects, maybe I could do it, but once I'm fine tuning stuff in the timeline, it can't be walking and doing that at the same time. But yeah, no, being in a chair by yourself, in a dark room for hours a day is not physically or mentally all that healthy. And sometimes I ask myself, why did I choose this profession that has me do that? So yeah, exercise has become non-negotiable for sanity, and I think creative process too. So building that in is important. Yeah.
Demand a video clip of you using this at some point.
Speaking of Ryan's humility point earlier, the only thing I would say is learning to be more humble about receiving feedback and criticism. That for me is probably the hardest thing. I really am not I have that moment, I don't know if you guys do too, of just pure and utter rebellion. If somebody's giving me notes on something, it's this weird thing that comes up. It's so protective and weird, and I have to remind myself that it's most notes are pretty freaking good. You know what I mean? Most notes are good notes, even from annoying clients and things from on the short form side, whatever. It's most notes are pretty good, and I just getting out of my own way with that stuff. That's what I would say is the biggest thing for me.
Just gotta have that huff first, and then let it, and then have it go through. Yeah.
Yeah.
any sort of things that help enhance your abilities, like meditation, yoga, exercise, walks, or certain beverages? Anybody else have anything that they want to share?
Coffee and CrossFit help a lot. I had repetitive stress injuries with my wrist and all that stuff. I have a sit-stand desk. All those things are good. I'm now 42, so I don't work 24-hour days anymore. Did that a few times when I was 24. So swear that stuff off.
That's a thing for the 20s for sure.
Yeah. If you have the stamina, work through it. But as you get older, I
think specifically there was Justin's watching. He's probably laughing. There was a 26-hour day we did once for a job for Yamaha. So
yeah, that's not healthy.
There's like an overnighter on like every project. I feel like once every month or two, there's an all-nighter.
I had a few of those on Bleeding Audio too. Luke, did you have anything that you wanted to share? And then I've got one last question. It's the last one after this.
No, the question seems framed around like healthy living, and I'm not that person. Like, do not take advice from me on how to live a better life.
Okay, great. Awesome answer. Let's move on. All right. So this one is actually, this last question is actually specifically for Jen and Luke. Work and family commitments can make it hard to commit to projects with long timelines. How quickly did you arrive at that decision for the handoff to edit Bleeding Audio? Which is interesting. Maybe I can answer this one, because the truth is Jen had another film commitment and we also ran out of money. And Jen got us this amazing assembly, this amazing rough cut assembly. It was like a polished assembly. It was really great. And then Luke came in and just like he and I worked nights and weekends basically, because I got him a job someplace. So I was like, well, you're here now. So yeah, you want to stay after work an extra hour today and we can work on my movie. But yeah, I mean, I don't mean to kind of like have this sort of clumsy ending here. So I'm gonna end it on.
You can go into Luke's guided meditation now.
Yeah, Luke's guided meditation.
Feel yourself sitting like through the balls of your feet.
But no, this is great. Thank you guys so much. I'm just gonna wrap it up with telling everybody to watch these films at Slamdance. We've got 18th and Grand, the Olympic Auditorium Story. We've got Holy Frit. We've got Bleeding Audio. All of these films are so beautifully edited. And I'm not coming from a biased place with Bleeding Audio. I'm so impressed with these editors. But seriously, each edit is so rhythmic, and there's so much skill in the way these movies are cut together, narratively, visually. It's just the talent in this panel is amazing. And so if you haven't seen the films already, please go watch them. Don't forget to vote for them for audience awards. And is there anything you guys wanted to say as one last thing about editing, about your films, anything at all? We'll start. I'm going to round table it this time. We're going to start with Shane.
I don't know. I just, I can't wait to watch your guys' films. I have not seen them yet. I've only seen trailers and stuff, and I'm super excited. Bleeding Audio's, clear. That's musically where I come from and bands I was in and stuff. So I'm like super like curious about that. I'm sure these are going to be, from what I've heard, fantastic. So I'm stoked, honored to be in company that I'm in, and this is a very, very, very cool deal. So thanks for doing this with us too. So
hell yeah.
Thanks.
And thank you, Shane. Jen.
Yeah, no, just thanks for putting this together. It's really fun to talk shop with all you guys. It's editing is a little too solitary sometimes, so it's nice to talk process with you all.
Luke?
Same. Thank you so much for the opportunity and getting to talk to such great people.
And Ryan?
I'm going to echo Shane because I've seen both the films. They're terrific, and I was really humbled and flattered to be included here. And people often ask me, do you like editing? And I just say, well, it beats having a real job. Yeah, I mean,
I love it.
I've said lots of things. I think that, I really enjoy doing this.
I love it. Yep. Editing is play, and it's a beautiful craft. And thank you guys for being here and for sharing your process and your stories. This has been such an amazing panel. And thank you to everybody who's watching. Thank you for contributing your questions. This has been so much fun. And just so that everybody knows, Slamdance is going on until February 25th. You can get a pass for only $10, and it gives you access on demand to the entire film program. So you can see every film that was mentioned here today. Go to slamdance.com to get your pass and for more details. And yeah, look up all these folks online, because when I was researching them earlier to introduce them, I got super intimidated by all the talent. So go check out everybody else's past movies. And yes, this live stream is going to be archived on the Bleeding Audio Film YouTube channel. So if you missed out seeing it live, or you want to go back and take notes from some of these editors' processes, you can just rewatch it as many times as you want. It's going to live up there forever. And yeah, thank you to everybody. And I'm going to stop the live stream. And